fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, They get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Thursday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
So glad to have you here on this show. We tend to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores, and we are searching for the truth together. That is our goal on this show. So good to see all of you on this Thursday. We've got a very busy show for you ahead. We're going to look at the latest push because the U.S. military has been failing, collapsing. Enrollment numbers are really low, and there is growing whispers in Washington. We've already told you about some members of Congress who are pushing for a draft to get our numbers up in the U.S. military. Can you believe that? And now a retired colonel has written a new piece, which is making its rounds in Washington, having a draft and our normal volunteer army. So what are we doing? This is reality in Washington, D.C. right now. We're going to talk about that.
Plus, we're going to talk to Colonel Douglas Macgregor about why Ukraine is a graveyard. These are not the titles. These are the titles from yesterday, but we're telling you anyway. Plus, Tucker Carlson got an interview with Devon Archer, the former associate of Hunter Biden. Interesting that he got it before Fox News, right? We're going to break that piece down for you as well.
That's right. And we've got so much more. We're also going to look at Patrick Lancaster is on the front lines for us tonight in one of the heaviest, one of the hottest zones in the Ukraine war. So we're going to be looking at that, all of that and much more as Redacted starts right now.
We're so glad you joined us today on this Thursday. It is Thursday, August 3rd. We have a lot of news to get to. We are not going to cover right now President Trump's indictment. That is happening at this very same hour. The mainstream media is just watching the plane take off. The same thing we did when he had COVID. Remember, we watched
the helicopter.
Watch the helicopter fly in the air.
Yeah.
That's happening. He will be walking into a courtroom. We have not... we're not advancing that story here. If you'd like to watch just a motorcade, this is not the channel for you. We have other more pressing items to get to.
No, it's voyeurism. That's what the liberal media does. It's just voyeurism and whatever they can do with him right now.
Yeah, exactly that. It feels that way. Yeah. And it also feels a little bit vengeful. And so we will advance that story as we continue to have news about the actual indictment, but that's not it today. So yes?
I was going to tell everyone before we get to the big story, we have a daily newsletter that I would love for all of you to read. You can check out our daily newsletter by going to redacted.inc. That's the place to go, not .com. Just go to redacted.inc. Put in your email address, and then you will receive a welcome email from us. It'll come from me, Clayton at redacted.inc, and you can read the newsletter in about 5 minutes over your cup of coffee first thing in the morning, but you have to verify your email because it might go to your spam folder, and actually Google has labeled us dangerous. Gmail has labeled us as dangerous, which I love, so it might go into your dangerous folder or your spam folder. Drag it over to your inbox and give Google and Gmail the middle finger and say they're not dangerous, they're just telling the truth. And that's what our newsletter covers, 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day. We did cover the Trump indictment in the newsletter this morning. But again, Monday through Thursday while we're in the summer, and then back to Monday through Friday once we get back into the school year and back into the routine of the fall. But anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for that newsletter. Again, redacted.inc.
All right. Well, are you ready to send your husband, son or nephew, daughter, relative into war? The military may be calling for a return to the draft. So this makes the war with Russia a very different story, doesn't it? The wars that the U.S. entered in the last 30 or so years have been arm's length away from the middle and upper classes, the young men and women who fought in Afghanistan, Iraq. They were from more largely poor and urban families. They were not the children of Western elites by and large. And this has allowed the U.S. to wage war without too much backlash because it's not the most vocal who make the biggest sacrifices. Now, it's just sort of, upsets us on the news a little. We hear it in the background and we're able to go on with our lives. That is literally the entire premise of Rachel Maddow's first book, Draft, from 2012. She makes the case that most Americans do not interact with the military in the way they once did, so it doesn't cost us personally. So we can ignore these wars. It's kind of amazing that over 10 years ago that even the liberal left press was comfortable promoting peace rhetoric, speaking out about the military expansion. They don't do that anymore. Now MSNBC's star anchor is one of the most war promoters. Like, Russia's the number one enemy. We need to go to war with them.
We need to build up our military in order to take on both China and Russia simultaneously.
Yeah.
We need to build up, and because we don't have the forces right now, so we actually need to build up our forces, and we need to do this through a draft. We need to have these numbers because we just don't have the numbers right now. And how are we going to fight both Russia and China simultaneously? This is what MSNBC pushes.
Yes, they push this now, but 10 years ago, they were comfortable pushing Rachel Maddow's book about the horror of military expansion and how it will creep up on us if it is not a sacrifice for all of us evenly, which it is not. So it's kind of amazing how far they've pushed away peace rhetoric. But she was right. The military has relied on recruitment from the poorest classes, and the poorest classes have suffered the death toll in countless wars in the Middle East that never should have been. But what if that changes? This is a military.com op-ed calling for a return to the draft. And this publication is generally a pretty good temperature for the pulse of the military and military rhetoric. We will note that it's an opinion piece, but it sufficed to scare me to death as the mother of a teenage boy. I'm not speaking against military service. I want to make that crystal clear. I am speaking against wasting young lives in useless wars. I respect the military, and I don't want anyone at risk needlessly. I hope you can appreciate that distinction. Now, the author notes that enrollment is down. This is something we've been warned about as of late. The Army says that it will be 15,000 recruits short of its 65,000 recruit target. The Navy says it will be 10,000 recruits short of its 38,000 recruit target. The Air Force says it will be 3,000 recruits short of its 27,000 recruit target. The Marine Corps is the only one that says we will hit our recruitment target, but it's been a struggle to do so. Now, according to the Pentagon data, only 9% of young people said that they would consider military service as their career. That's down from 13%. I mean, think of it. That's not even 1 in 10. Go ahead.
I was going to say, think about back in like the 40s and 50s and stuff. It was like a man's honor to go in and serve in the military. Like, people were like, I'm going to go into the military as a career.
Yes.
People were excited to do it. And now that all of these wars are happening and we're being the policemen of the world, people are losing faith in the military. And they have never had to draft during non-war times. I mean, the times that they drafted was major offensives, right? Offensives. It wasn't during peacetime.
No,
and
of course.
technically, we're still in peacetime, but...
Yeah, exactly. It was Korea. It was right after the Cuban Missile Crisis and into the Vietnam War,
yes.
Right? And so, he makes the point in this piece that because of the last two massive wars that we've had, they've been unsuccessful. These two massive 20-year wars that we've had have been unsuccessful.
Well,
and
think about
that's why these numbers are down.
Right. And think about the way the military is presented. Now, I've just this year read David Goggins' book, who was a Navy SEAL and an Army Ranger.
No, well, he went through Army Ranger training, but didn't actually get past it.
Okay. And I also have read Chelsea Manning's book. Now, a lot of times these recruitment efforts, especially on these memoirs, are about like, hey, you're down on your luck. You don't come from a wealthy family. You don't have any other options. Join the military and we'll make something out of you, and otherwise you would be nothing. And the reason they recruited David Goggins to do this job was to go into Black communities and show them like, hey, you're kind of screwed anyway. Come to the military, right? And so it's now presented to people who have not really a lot of options in life, instead of being presented as an opportunity for pride and advancement.
Yeah, I was going to say, even in my day and age, like when I was a kid, they had like the GI Bill, and you could go in and you could make a career and then come out and get college credits. Like there was things about it that even I was convinced in looking into it, because I was like, well, that sounds kind of cool that I could go in, get some college credits, come out and use that money and everything to do it. Like they don't have that anymore. Now they just show you are like the commercials are people with weapons and technology and all this other stuff.
Right.
Well, it is like a modern form of slavery, if you think about it, right? You're basically taking these people, and a draft would adversely affect poorer populations in the United States, and people of wealth and means can get out of it. That's exactly what happens. And so it would adversely affect poor and lower middle class individuals, and it would push them into a form of like modern slavery.
Right.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And, you know, what is the selling point after all of these wars? Even as the piece points out, he says that after 2 decades of war, both of which ended unsuccessfully, there's, you know, low recruitment now. Well, unsuccessful wars, you know, if you read what the military calls the AAR, or the After Action Review, you wouldn't sign up for this either. If you looked through those wars, in this opinion piece, he says that the low opinion of the military is really politicians' faults because they sort of use it as a pawn in their political play. Or maybe it's the needless dying and the fact that people don't want to put their life at risk for something that they think is, again, a needless war. You can't really put a good PR spin on that.
And tell us what successful would have been. Like what would successful look like?
Right, I know. Unsuccessful. Like we did exactly what we set out to do, which was totally destabilize the Middle East. So what is this? What is a successful war in Iraq?
Us owning it, still having our bases there, like successfully?
Yeah, we already do.
What does that look like?
I mean, I guess in Afghanistan, I don't know. We pilfer everything. We pilfer all their minerals and resources. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, and it is amazing. It is amazing to think about it in those terms, right?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Now, the draft is presented as a cost saver because apparently it costs $15,000 to recruit each new member, putting a total on this of about $2 billion annually, I suppose. Now, it's worth noting, though, not only, are they asking people to sign up for, to sign on to endless wars, but also the suicide rate is really high for U.S. veterans. Look at this research showing that 16.8 veterans die by suicide every day. That is an insane number. 16.8 veterans taking their own life every day. Many of them report being unable to live with what they saw when they were deployed, or what they themselves did when they were asked to do, or what they saw being done to other human beings. Many of them simply can't reconcile having lost friends and colleagues to these pointless wars. Now, interestingly enough, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say really quick, I heard a guy that put it a great way. He said he fought harder when he got home for benefits and help with what happened to him over there than he fought in the whole war.
Yeah.
The battle was harder, he said.
Well,
and that just kind of puts it in perspective.
Now, I want to sort of put a highlighter here on this idea that so many veterans have mental health disorder. I would argue this is not a disorder. This is a normal human reaction to having seen horrors, right? I think that we pretend that veterans who've seen these terrible things are now diseased because they can't handle it. I feel like that's more a sign of health, that they can't handle it. Unless you're a psychopath and you can easily compartmentalize that stuff. No one's meant to handle it. And I think this all brings up the uncomfortable question about the war that we're facing right now. Do people who support dragging on the war in Ukraine only support it because they're risking other people's sons and not our own? Would you feel differently if it were your family or your son at risk? I think it's also worth noting that even Ukrainians do not want to be drafted into this war any more than you might want your family members drafted. Take a look at this. This week, the SBU said it uncovered an underground draft dodging service in Ukraine that helps people avoid military service for about $6,000 apiece. Ukraine doesn't have a draft anymore. They have a full-on mobilization. They have an order for all men of military age to report for duty. Or rather report for death, given how many of them are losing their lives trying to take back territory that does not want to be a part of Ukraine.
So today we got new numbers on the war in Ukraine. And you wonder why they're trying to get away from this mobilization. The new numbers that came out today show that about 400,000 Ukrainians have been killed. Let me repeat that. 400,000 have been killed, and upwards of 2 million have been wounded, either permanently wounded, loss of limb, mentally incapacitated. Doesn't matter. 400,000 dead. So you want to throw more people into a meat grinder like that? Absolutely not. And that's exactly, I think that's why you're seeing these numbers so low. For what? What are we fighting for?
Well,
so we can go to the Middle East and destabilize these countries? What are we doing?
Think about every single interview we've had on this show and every interview that we've seen from Ukrainian soldiers. Have any of them sounded like they knew what they were there for and that they were excited to be there? Not a single one that I've heard.
Well, NBC reporters from the United States are excited to be there.
Right. MSNBC reporters who are like, I've enough talk. I'm done talking. So I'm showing up here now.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I would say aside from one battalion, by the way.
Okay. While we're thinking about this war, let's just look at the map as it stands today and why lives are currently being lost. Here is from RIA's war map from today, August 3rd. The red is what we broadly call the Donbass, the area that has been bombed by the Ukrainian army since 2014 and has been begging Russia to intervene. In fact, in 2015, the International Monetary Fund threatened to cut Ukraine off from loans unless it stopped spending $1 million per day to terrorize this region in red that they want back. Russia intervened last year and took over most of that area, but the dark gray that you see there is still part of the area that wants to be Russia, voted to be Russia, but Russia does not have control over yet. Now, Ukraine's counteroffensive was meant to push that red part back and turn it white, solidly in Ukraine's control. They did not do that, so they continue to throw young people's bodies. If you just keep looking at this map, they're basically throwing lives against that red line where it turns gray, trying to see if they can push it back. They're not going to. Basically, they're like flies in a fly zapper. Now, given that people there want to be Russia, have wanted that by a large majority since 2014, as shown by this 2014 article saying that Ukrainians want Russia to invade in this region, they have been waiting. They voted. Why does their vote not count? Why does their vote necessitate young people to die for that? So again, when you see this article, would you throw your son, brother, husband, or father into that fly zapper? Does this influence your desire to be a peace activist, given that wars would no longer be at the arm's length from the majority of us? Now, this is not just a hypothetical. Just this week, President Biden called up 3,000 reservists to deploy to Europe. So they are, in fact, reaching to the bottom of the barrel. If they get there, it's all of us, all of our lives at risk. So again, if we get there and a draft is necessary, in the words of Effie, may the odds be ever in your favor.
It's really tragic because you wish that Washington would maybe sit back and say, maybe we should analyze this need for all of these hundreds of thousands of people, right? As Dwight D. Eisenhower realized that he had lost control at the end of his presidency and warned everybody in his farewell speech, beware the military-industrial complex. He was saying that because he'd already lost it. He'd already lost control of it. And now it is as massive as it is. Maybe it's time to reassess and say, hey, maybe the aggression that we take out around the world is not necessary to have this massive standing army. To, as he writes, and as members of Congress have said, the need for the draft is so we can fight basically two wars. The need is to basically fight a two-frontal war against Russia and China. That is not, we would be destroyed if that happens. So that's the mentality right now among members of Congress, former members like Adam Kinzinger and others who've called for a draft and who have called for this larger mobilization of forces in the United States. Maybe it's time to pull back and say, hey, maybe this aggression, this massive military-industrial complex is the problem. But you have bipartisan support on this stuff in Washington.
Right, which again begs the question, if it's your kids, do you feel differently, right? Or if it's, someone in the chat said, send Congress. They're all way past the draft age.
I was going to say
they're
kids.
They're all too old.
Yeah, Dianne Feinstein's children. I have no idea.
It would be her great-grandchildren that are eligible.
Remember when Michael Moore was walking on the steps there on that documentary asking them if they'd send their kids?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And well, I just want to say something also about the selective service thing and the idea of registering. There's this whole it's a canard, right? If you think about it, I remember when I had to register for the Secret Service.
Mm-hmm.
When I turned, was it 16 you have to do it, or 18? I forget. Do you remember,
18.
Dave? 18. As a young man in America, you have to go register for the selective service, excuse me, to be drafted. As a young boy in America, that's what you have to do. You have to go to the post office and fill out those forms. And I remember thinking at the time, they've sent me letters ahead. They've sent me stuff. And I've thought about this over the years, this idea that you need to register.
Yeah. They already knew.
They already know. They already have, they have the census information. They have our tax information. They have my parents. They know exactly where I am. I mean, again, they know that. Why do I have to go register for anything? It's like a ceremonial thing. I don't know what they want me to do to register for the selective service. They already know everything about me.
Yeah.
It's a dog and pony show.
Now, it's one thing in certain countries like Mexico or Israel where you have compulsory military service for everyone between a certain age. It's one thing to have those in countries that are not waging wars around the world. It's quite a different thing to be drafted into a country that thinks war is fun, thinks war is the business of the day, thinks that literally that's the way they run their show.
Yeah,
right?
Vivek Ramaswamy in his book, Woke Incorporated. It's a great book, by the way. And he makes the argument that one of the things that actually brings certain countries together is that mandatory military service, because then young men of all classes, it's not just rich and, versus poor, and poor go into it and rich don't.
Yeah.
In some cases, and I know that there are exceptions, but for the most part, it's all, so you get this sort of melding of classes, and you don't have the class problems that you have in other countries.
Well, and it's also,
that's Vivek's
they're doing
argument.
projects for the community and for people, and they're out there around people. So it's not like you're in this, box of like our military. Could you imagine having somebody screaming in your face and calling you a dirtbag and deprogramming you from civilian life so that you can be this machine of a soldier? Most countries don't do that. They don't break them down.
Don't they? I didn't.
No, I think they more try to lift them up in some
service.
But there are no pro-peace. Yeah. I mean, there's no one in Congress that's pro-peace. I mean, you're hard-pressed to find anybody. I mean, what happened to people like Bernie Sanders? They were supposed to be pro-peace, anti-war.
Tulsi Gabbard, but she was sent the heck out of there, for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Justin Amash.
So you get pushed out of here. Anyway, let us know your thoughts on this in the comments. Colonel Doug.
And whether or not you think it would change the temperature for increasing war rhetoric supporting Ukraine, or would people say, oh, wait a minute, this involves me, I feel a little bit different. Would that change it? Would that change the appetite?
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on that in the comments. Colonel Douglas McGregor is going to join us next. We're going to talk about, he's just written a new piece, and I want to ask him about that, basically saying Ukraine is now a graveyard. And pushing for peace. We'll talk to him about that. Also, Tucker exposes the Biden crime family with a bombshell interview. We're going to talk about that coming up. Patrick Lancaster joins us from the front lines with a new report that is unbelievable. You'll want to see that. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo. If you're an investor looking for an easier way to trade, then you need to try Moomoo, our favorite trading platform. They have supported our show from the very beginning, so you should support them. If you want to get up to 16 free stocks just for opening your account and making your initial deposits, you can do that by going to the link right on your screen. It's redacted.inc/Moomoo. Now, I love their morning call alerts. I get all sorts of alerts during the day on different stocks and companies. I was on the phone with an investor friend of mine today for about an hour, and we were talking through some different minerals companies. We were looking at different uranium companies because right now we have what's going on in Niger and what's happening in France, trying to get as much uranium out of Niger as possible, and the coup that's happening there. This is a fascinating time to be an investor in minerals. And so, again, that's why I use Moomoo. You can, it's a very easy to use application on your iPhone, your Android device, Mac or Windows. But the best part is you get 16 free stocks and either a Google or a Tesla stock just for opening your account and making your initial deposits. And right now we want to announce that they have just opened in Canada, and you'll get a free $100 gift card just for opening your account up there in Canada. So, Yes, you can finally take advantage of Moomoo in Canada. They just recently rolled out in Australia as well. So again, growing. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. They have hundreds of millions of users worldwide. So check them out today. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo. It's redacted.inc/Moomoo. Well, America's proxy war with Russia has transformed Ukraine into a graveyard. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who's written a new piece for the American Conservative. And among the things he highlights is this change in strategy on Vladimir Putin's part, an awareness that this incrementalism, this sort of step-by-step approach, might not have been working. And now the new move by Vladimir Putin and the Russian army over the past couple of months has been devastating for Ukraine. What will NATO do now in the wake of this graveyard? Colonel Douglas Macgregor joins us now. Colonel, great to see you. Great piece. Really, really interesting. And I hadn't heard this before, this deep change in strategy on the part of Vladimir Putin and the Russian military.
Well, Putin, as I point out in the article, is someone who believed in rational choice theory. Rational choice theory says that if you give people the opportunity to make a decision, they will always be rational. They will always choose something, some option, whether it's in politics, economics, doesn't make any difference, that it aligns with their own personal best interests. Well, that's not true, Clayton. People are not rational. People are irrational. That's the problem with all irrational choice theory and analysis. And Putin, when he began this thing, imputed rationality to us. When he first entered Ukraine, he was absolutely convinced that after 15, 16 years of telling us repeatedly, don't move NATO's boundary closer to Russia, don't militarize our neighbors against us. We won't tolerate hostile nations on our borders, and especially we will not tolerate a Ukraine that is hostile to Russia and a base of operations against us. He said, well, if I move into Ukraine with, at the time he had about 200,000 troops, and he initially went in with 90,000 on a very broad front, and he gave explicit orders: avoid collateral damage, don't harm civilians, give the Ukrainians a chance to surrender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He thought that as soon as he demonstrated his seriousness with military power, that Washington and its allies would say, now, wait a minute, let's stop. We don't want this to become a larger war. We need to talk, because that was, in his estimation, the rational response. So he miscalculated. What he got instead was the opposite, where Washington was actually goading him, if you will, or baiting him into going into Ukraine. They were delighted he went in because they reached the erroneous conclusion that this was their opportunity to destroy Russia, to mire it in this endless war that would sap them of strength and so forth. So he went along for a while, and then when it became clear, when Boris Johnson showed up very suddenly in April and said, look, Mr. Zelensky, you can't make a deal. Don't accept neutrality. We will stand behind you. We will give you everything you need. You will have the total scientific industrial strength of the United States and its allies behind you. You're going to win. I think Zelensky believed it. And I mean, honestly, why wouldn't he, given the track record of the last 50, 60 years? But everyone miscalculated, what Russia would do. And Russia had to make a change in strategy. They couldn't go on with this small force and expect to get anywhere. And so they went over to the strategic defense. They occupied the areas that are populated by Russians in southern Ukraine. They built up these defenses. They consolidated their position. And to their surprise, when they invited the Ukrainians to attack them, the Ukrainians were stupid enough to do so. And so starting in November, December, all the way until really within the last week or so, the Ukrainians have hurled tens of thousands of troops and thousands of tanks and guns and so forth at these defenses. So the strategy of defense has worked. But the problem now is that Putin understands that it doesn't seem to make any difference to people in the West. It doesn't matter how many Ukrainians die. They don't seem to care. He thought that they would be as horrified by this as he is. He wants an end to the war. He still wants to negotiate. No one in Washington is prepared to do that, and everyone is stonewalling him. And even worse, there's some evidence now that the Poles, Lithuanians may be interested in some sort of intervention that they claim they would execute on their own without being part of NATO. And this is absurd because they are in NATO. And if they go into Western Ukraine, they will be treated as NATO forces. This opens up Poland, Lithuania, and anyone else who may join this insanity to being attacked by the Russians. You recall that just about a week and a half ago, the Russians attacked this port of Reni on the river that separates Romania from Ukraine. And this particular port was devastated by hypersonic missiles and drones and so forth. And everyone was horrified. They said, this is right on the border with Romania. Well, that was the point. The Russians were trying to say, look, you cross this border and you go into Ukraine, this is what's going to happen to you. So here we sit and we're trying to figure out, what are we going to do? And Jake Sullivan says he wakes up every day and is trying to find more artillery ammunition because we have no more and we can't produce anymore, and he's trying to ramp it up. Well, under those circumstances, does it make sense to continue to ask Ukrainians to die by the thousands? And a friend of mine who is in a position to watch all of this from space-based surveillance tells me that the battlefields are littered with Ukrainian dead. They can't even pick them up anymore, or they're not bothering to do so.
Wow.
The hospitals are full of broken soldiers who will never return to active duty. And no one really knows how many have died, but the estimates are about 300,000 to 350,000 dead. And of course, Ukraine, people continue to leave. We now think 14 million people have left Ukraine. That leaves maybe 18 million, depending upon how you want to calculate it. This is a catastrophe. Ukraine is being destroyed. So when is someone going to step forward and say, for humanitarian reasons, if nothing else, this must end? And that's why I said, if you don't do this, the Russians are finally going to say, well, that's it. The only way we're going to convince these people that it's over is if we march down the main streets of Kiev. We go all the way to the river and cross the river. And of course, anyone with any sense at all in NATO would say that's the last thing we want. We set out to prevent the Russians from moving west. We thought Ukraine was going to be a bulwark against Russia. Now we've created a monster. No one wants to go there. No one wants to admit that this was a very flawed policy from the beginning.
You write in your piece, make peace, you fools. And it's the opposite of what Jake Sullivan dreams of when he wakes up in the morning. How can we send more munitions into Ukraine? How can we send in more weapons, more armored vehicles, more F-16s, more things that we don't even have at home? How could we ship more of it there? And
well, when you have large numbers of Ukrainians deserting, they're not stupid. Ukrainian soldiers see the losses. They can't make any headway against these defenses. They're not trained for it or equipped for it. So many of them are just giving up. Some are trying to get home, and they're trying to avoid being shot by the secret police behind the lines. Others have decided, well, we're going to surrender. And the Russians have always treated Ukrainian soldiers very well, in contrast to the way Ukrainians have treated Russian soldiers. So this is a disaster. We should see the facts, make the right choice. But this statement, make peace, you fools, was actually lifted from a German general in 1944 after the landings at Normandy in the summer. And this four-star German general was asked by Hitler and others, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? He said, make peace, you fools. That's the answer. He was correct. That's what should happen now. But even worse, if you look at the broader world condition, Russia has always had the ability, thanks to its alliance with China and its friends all over the world, and they have huge numbers of friends right now. There are lots of people cheering on Russia. We're in the minority in terms of support. They can escalate horizontally. So in Africa, for instance, in Niger and other countries in what we call Afrique du Nord, French Northwest Africa, these states are effectively throwing the French out. They're staging coups and putting in governments that are now friendly to Russia and anti-Western. And in the case of Niger, they represent probably 50 to 60% of the uranium that is exported every year to France to power their nuclear power plants. Well, without Niger, and Niger is now in the hands of an anti-Western government, they don't have access to that uranium. Now, that may seem small to some people, but it's huge. And we are seen now as having destroyed the flow of ammonia through pipelines to the West. Well, that means you can't develop effective fertilizer. This puts the whole green revolution in much of the world at risk. Because remember, the reason we have this enormous population on the planet in most of the developing world is because Europeans and Americans created the Green Revolution, the pesticides and the fertilizers that ensure the abundance of food. Well, if they go away, and that's the way it's beginning to look right now, that's going to create havoc and chaos all over Africa, South America, Southeast Asia. The whole thing's a disaster. It needs to stop. It's not about we're winning, they're losing. We've lost this particular operation. This is a dead end for us. We need a radical change in course. Demilitarize our relationship with most of the world. Recognize we can't bully everybody and get on with life. But nobody wants to go there, Clayton.
No, they want to do the opposite, and they're in a state of denial. And do you think that that is the end game here? Because, as I was sitting around just talking with family the other night, and I said, well, what does NATO hope to achieve here? What is the end game for NATO? Because if Putin does decide, well, we can't have this operation continuing in Kiev. Like, we need to take out the rest of this country. We need to secure it because we're going to continue to be attacked in Crimea and other targets. The only way for us to be secure is to completely take over this country. Is that the end game? Is that what NATO wants? It seems like they're pushing for it.
Well, I know it's not what the Russians want, because from the very beginning, Putin made it clear that he understands the Ukrainians in the West want nothing to do with Russia. He's always understood that. But he insisted on neutrality because he didn't want to be under attack from those regions where he knows the people are hostile to him. Well, that opportunity is now passed, and he doesn't want to go up there. So I think he is really looking for a way to avoid that, but he has to have a partner. And I think his best bet at this point is for Europeans to do something, to stop behaving as sort of obedient vassals of Greater Washington's empire and start behaving like Germans, like Frenchmen, like Italians. What are their interests? And if you look at their interests, they do not align whatsoever with this war against Russia. They never have. It's only the Poles, really, and to some extent the Lithuanians, maybe the Latvians, I don't know, that have been so violently anti-Russian and have insisted on this, along with Great Britain. Great Britain seems to be ruled by people not very different from the ones that are ruling us right now in Washington. And that's disappointing, but that's not Europe. So the Europeans could forge a different way ahead. And I hope that they do, because I don't see us doing much. Somebody said to me the other night, what do you think we'll do? And I said, well, go back and look at Vietnam. What happened in Vietnam? We just kind of packed up, pretended that we'd left everything better than it was. And of course, that wasn't true. We said we'd given the Vietnamese all we could. We'd trained their forces, and we left. And when things fell apart, what did people say? Well, we did all we could. They got everything, but we can't go on like this. And we changed the subject. I think something similar to that will mark the end of the war in Ukraine.
Wow. Or worse, Afghanistan, right? After this could drag on for another 15 years. And that's the really scary.
I don't think so, because Europe is not Afghanistan. And I think the Europeans won't tolerate that. They know that could lead to a regional war. That's the whole point. That if you let these Poles and Lithuanians stagger into Western Ukraine, you're essentially setting us up for a regional war. What's to stop the Russians then from saying, fine, we'll hit all the airports, all the airfields, all the storage locations, all the forces in Poland, in Lithuania? I mean, what's to stop them? They can hit them now. That was the point of striking Reni right there on the border with Romania. So I don't think so. I think the Europeans at that stage, I'd be very surprised if somebody just didn't stand up and say enough's enough. So I don't think the Afghan scenario is plausible. And I think anybody in the European governments, like this man Stoltenberg or Schultz or the rest of them, they'll be out on their ear. No one will want them.
Let's hope you're right. Let's hope you're right. I've seen some of these, United Kingdom politicians over the past few weeks saying, well, we could definitely go on for another 4 years, another 5 years.
Clayton, remember the problem with Great Britain is it's not very different from us. The British have this thing called the Channel between them and Europe, and they've always felt as though they could act with impunity. Yeah. I think they're mistaken. I mean, the Russians could visit them too. They don't think so, but it could happen. And I think the British take the wrong view. Charles de Gaulle said, the problem with NATO is that Americans don't live in Europe and Great Britain is an island. He was right.
Yeah, you're right about that. Well, let's see if there's any strong leadership in Europe, and we'll make a change on this. Colonel, great piece. I encourage all of our readers to check it out. I'll have it linked up in the show description. As always, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Clayton.
All right. Well, we thank him for his analysis. Always, you know, he's batting 1,000 since he started coming on Redacted, I got to say.
A lot of people, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. When I made when I just saying to him the Afghanistan analogy, what I'm saying is the length of this thing, and as someone in our chat, Golan Heights in our chat just said that we just removed 300,000 15 millimeter shells, I think, or 100, I forget exactly what he said. Huge stores of ammunition from Israel to repurpose into I said Afghanistan, but into Ukraine. And how long they want to drag this on. I mean, how many more years do you want to drag this on? I think they do absolutely have an appetite to drag this on for a long time.
And what scares me about that is that we've lived through it, right? And we know what it takes to sort of go to sleep about wars that are going on in our country and just sort of feel like, yeah, people are fighting over there and that's, how it is. And sort of you're able to tune it out. That was the purpose of the piece we did before this, is just how much we should not be able to tune out these wars that just wage, under our tax dollars.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Hey, if you guys subscribe to the channel, you can subscribe and also smash that like button. We'd really appreciate it. There's over close to 30,000 of you watching on Rumble and YouTube tonight. So good to see all 30,000 of you guys. Smash the like button and subscribe. Your name will pop up here on the big screen. Thank you guys so much. And it really helps us push us further out into the algorithm, because YouTube specifically loves to suppress our show because they don't like the truth, I guess. We cover the truth on this show, and it's not in fashion these days. So please smash that like button and push us up out further to people who need to see this. But we've got more news to get to on this Thursday. Tucker Carlson exposes the Biden crime family in a really fascinating interview. We're going to go through the intricacies of that in mere moments. Plus, Patrick Lancaster just filed a report from the front lines in Donetsk, which is really like the hottest zone right now, one of the most dangerous spots, the flashpoint in this war. Wait until you see this report. It's really, really jaw-dropping. We will do that. Plus, Jeffrey Brodsky is going to be here. He's the only independent journalist to go to all 4 of the explosion sites of the Nord Stream pipeline bombing. And he uncovered soil samples and took them to labs to be analyzed. What were the results? We'll tell you coming up.
All right, but first we want to tell you about our friends over at Aura, because anything can be found on the internet about you personally, your family, your data, your credit cards. The other day, I just got an alert from Aura that someone had used my American Express at Dick's Sporting Goods. They don't have that where I live. I don't shop at Dick's Sporting Goods. So I was able to get an alert, cancel that charge, and get a new credit card right away, because you know that data brokers are selling your information all over the internet. No matter how careful you are, you're here, you use the internet, you know how dangerous it is. These people profit by selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, anyone else who wants to learn anything about you. That's why our sponsor, Aura, will help identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They'll opt you out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. So you can use our link at aura.com/redacted to try it for free for 2 weeks and see how many data brokers are sharing your information. You can also just click this QR code that's on the bottom right of your screen right there, and that will take you directly to our 2-week trial for free. Because it's a great way to just make sure to keep your eye on the pulse of who's sharing your data. It's a wonderful service, and it's absolutely just invaluable to know where your data is going, because this is your identity on the internet, and you can't be too careful with it. Aura's apps also feature a VPN, password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, internet parallel controls, and protects your devices from malware. Aura has almost every internet safety tool you will need all inside one app. You'll just be shocked how much you find out when you visit. So again, scan that QR code or go to aura.com/redacted to start your free trial, or use that QR code. Once again, that's aura.com/redacted.
Let's see, in the Oregon Outback in our chat says, will Aura protect me from STDs? I don't believe so. I believe that's on you to protect yourself from that.
Well, yeah, but I guess if your, data's being sold on pornographic sites, I don't know, and you meet up with some of those people.
Guess so.
This is a stretch.
I mean, it could lead you to feel more responsible. Knowing the information and being more responsible could lead you to more responsible choices. So
there you go. Or I hope we answered your question, Oregon. We covering the important stories. By the way, I've got a little surprise that I want to show off a little bit later here. A little surprise arrived in the mail.
Is it for me?
Yeah, it's for you. It's for yeah. So yes, it is for you.
Oh, thank you. You shouldn't have.
It's for you specifically.
Are you
okay.
taking guesses?
Yeah, well, we'll tell you in a minute. Okay. So we'll get there in a minute. But first, on Wednesday, Tucker Carlson aired an astonishing interview featuring Devon Archer, which we will show you in a minute. If you're not familiar with his name, this is Archer himself. As a former business associate of Hunter Biden, and he spoke to the House Oversight Committee on Monday under oath, and he offered details on his decade-long relationship with Hunter Biden and the times when he and President Biden crossed paths. So what exactly does that mean? Including a series of phone calls between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. So during his testimony, Archer admitted that they had capitalized on the Biden name for their business ventures.
Now, this interview was behind closed doors to Congress. And so we had to take congressional summaries and take their word for it. So the reason this is so explosive is because we get to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Is that the right, or the cow's mouth?
Yeah,
the horse's mouth. We hear it from the horse's mouth because he now is speaking for himself. Why? It's interesting. Like, why was that hearing closed door? Why couldn't we see that? We saw the IRS whistleblower testimony. Why not this one, right?
Yeah.
So now we get to see for ourselves.
So during his testimony, Archer admitted that they had capitalized on the Biden name for their business ventures. And to kick off this interview, Tucker asked whether Archer believed Hunter would have achieved the same level of success in his business ventures had he not been the vice president's son. It's a great question. At first,
so you worked with Hunter Biden in a bunch of different businesses. What were the specific skills that he brought to clients?
Well, at the end of the day, he had a career in Washington, graduated Yale Law School, and had a very big network in D.C. and brought that know-how and understanding of D.C. and ultimately the Biden brand.
The know-how. So as far as I could tell, he wasn't doing legal work.
Correct.
He wasn't in the counsel's office at Burisma, right?
No.
So the network and the Biden brand sounds like the kind of key component of
absolutely
what he was bringing.
Yep.
Do you think that he would have been in those businesses, not having a business background, without his father being in a government position?
It's hard to speculate in those regards. I mean, I think when we initially met and he talked about his advisory business, his business that needed to transition from lobbying to advisory and the interest in private equity, it seemed like a new and interesting network for us to expand our business. Whether he could have, been in that position, it's hard for me to speculate. But obviously, the brand of Biden, adds a lot of power when your dad's the vice president.
So he did.
Now, interesting what he says here, that he couldn't be a lobbyist anymore, right? Because obviously the vice president cannot be a lobbyist, cannot be involved in that kind of business at the time, right? And so the idea, like, my dad's vice president, but I can't sell it as a lobbyist because that's too forward.
It's too on the nose.
That's too on the nose, right? So if we just change the name of the business into private equity, that's a whole other ball of wax.
Right, yeah. And, first Archer sort of danced around that question, sort of hemming and hawing, that Hunter's law school background would have been a good enough reason for people to get on the phone with him and had done business. And he just basically concedes the point, right? He's like, no, he was definitely selling and currying favor by using his dad's name. Now, Tucker pressed him on what exactly Hunter Biden's skills are and what his business actually was doing. Right? You mentioned private equity. Like, what the hell is this company actually doing? Is it a business? Would you produce anything? or are you leeches? What are you guys actually doing? At the end of the day, he was just selling access to his dad. That's really all the business was. So, that's what this business model was. Like, can you imagine the business plan? Like, what's your business plan? Just sell access. Just sell access. That's it, to my dad.
I'm a connector.
I'm a connector.
I'm a wealth
and I make
mover.
money off of it. So here's what he says about what access means. Watch.
He knew a lot of people, and obviously I know you're pointing to the father being the key relationship.
Well, no, I'm just trying to get a sense of, like, Washington's not a money town,
right?
People aren't in business in Washington for the most part, and most people don't have business skills that I've noticed in 30 years of living there. So really, the business of Washington is selling access. That's what it looked like to me.
Yes.
Not just Hunter Biden, but like
I think that's one of the core misconceptions. It seems like when understanding a regulatory environment means selling access at the end of the day. That's how I interpret it, and I think that's how most people on in Wall Street, whether they admit it or not, interpret it.
Yeah, of course. That's exactly it. Hey, Ken in our chat says, Carl Stenbeck says, stop censoring the chat or we will leave. Hey, Carl, we don't do that. You're free to leave. We don't, it's a free country. You can do whatever you want. But Rumble does not censor the chat, so you're more than welcome to go over to Rumble. YouTube, though, does censor the chat. So they will, if you say something or you put links in there and other stuff like that, they will censor that stuff. So just be careful. Like if you're swearing or saying anything like that's off color or whatever, they automatically do that shit. So anyway, I wanted to
And sometimes we can see it says held for review, but it goes too fast, so we miss it. But it's definitely not us.
Yeah, just so FYI, Carl. Anyway, so the big question.
Go
ahead.
I just want to say really quick, like, if I were a businessman and they're like, hey, the vice president's part of this, like, at this point, I would be like, yeah, I'm not interested. It's like, does that mean anything anymore? I think there's a certain business world that it would, because that's access, I think, more than anything.
Let's play out what it meant for specifically Burisma was licensing in private oil and gas in Ukraine in order to disrupt, Russian monopoly of oil and gas in that region. And so absolutely, you want somebody who will be supportive of your business model when it comes to disrupting an entire country or continent's oil and gas industry. Then you need lawmakers. You need influential people. It's not just like hey, in the way that those, what was the cryptocurrency that Gisele Bündchen was connected to through Tom Brady in the commercial? It's not like that. It's not a name dropper. It's an actual, that was FTX. I totally forgot. Yeah, this is not a name dropping situation. This is actual policy that you can get that will make people money.
So the big question, of course, is whether or not Joe Biden was aware of which businesses or government officials were on the speakerphone at the time, or whether or not he knew that these people were on the speakerphone at the time and there was business people in the room with Hunter during these 20 or so phone calls, right? That's the big question. Did Joe know he was helping to grease the palms of his son, making these business meetings happen, business deals happen? Hey, the big guy is on the phone. See how I can get you access like this? Like the vice president's right here on the phone. Watch.
So how many, it's been reported and you have said that there were occasions when Joe Biden would call in with clients present on a speakerphone.
Right.
How many times do you think that happened?
Over a 10-year partnership, I would, the number I'm going with is 20. That's probably the amount that I kind of record. Yeah, a lot, you could say.
So Joe Biden, who's very much a product of Washington, of course must have known that he was calling in to effectively a business meeting that his son was having. He must have understood that was kind of what his son was selling.
Well, it's hard for me to speculate on that.
But I guess my question, just to keep it to the facts, Joe Biden, then the sitting vice president, knew that there were Hunter's business associates in the room.
Yeah, I think I can definitively say at particular dinners or meetings, he knew there were business associates, and or if I was there, I was a business associate too.
Yeah.
So I think, or if any of the other colleagues from the DC office or the New York office were there. So yeah, at times there were. From the to be completely clear on the calls, I don't know if it was an orchestrated call in or not. It certainly was powerful though, because if you're sitting with a foreign business person and you hear the vice president's voice, that's prize enough. That's pretty impactful stuff for anyone in the world.
It's been reported, and I know that it is true, that Hunter and his brother were very close to their dad.
Absolutely.
Which I think is great.
Yep.
I've got a lot of kids. I'm very close to them, talk to them every day.
Yeah.
Never called them on speaker during a business meeting. That's weird. You've got a lot of kids. You're close to them. Do you call them on speaker during business meetings?
Do I call?
I mean, what is that? A grown man calling his dad on a speakerphone during a business meeting?
Right. And to be clear, sometimes the call was coming in and the speaker would go on. So it's just the presence. You have to be. I mean, you understand DC, right? So the power to have that access and that conversation, and it's not in a scheduled conference call, and it's a part of your family. That's like the pinnacle of power in DC.
100%. I guess I'm pivoting against the lie that I'm hearing people tell with a straight face. Congressman Goldman, for example, that we don't really know what was going on. Really? You're taking a call from the vice president and you put it on speaker. It's not just, hey, Dad, I'm in a meeting with some buddies.
Right.
It's let me put my dad, the vice president, on speaker.
Yeah. Yep. In the rear view, it's an abuse of soft power, I'd say.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly, huh?
Yeah.
Archer also admitted that he got a little too close to the sun. He said, I flew a little too close to the sun and I got burned by all of this, by the Biden family. And that may be him doing some damage control now. I see a bunch of people in the chat saying, this guy needs to go to jail as well. Let us know your thoughts on that. He basically said anyone who is sort of sitting there saying that it was disingenuous to act as if they had no idea why Hunter Biden would have been on the Ukrainian energy giant Burisma's payroll. I don't know. I mean, I guess they just hired him for his law skills. I have no idea why he would have been on the board of Burisma. Really? He's saying it's totally disingenuous. You know exactly why he was on the board from 2014 to 2019. It was to curry favor and access for his dad and the vice president.
And think of how easily these kind of things can be bought and sold, where you can be on speakerphone with someone of access and say, hey, I'm going to have so-and-so call you about this thing I want. Yeah, absolutely. Because you're a friend of my son's. Okay, I'll take the call, right? That's access that normal people can't get. And so then you can come in and say, I want this thing. I'm a friend of your son. You can get it. This is, and so I've seen all of these pundits online now and on CNN saying, this is just Joe Biden being supportive of his son. Like, okay, like my dad watching one of my broadcasts or something like that. That's not really the same. It's not like a loving fatherly thing. And he should know to be careful with who gets access to him because he's a career politician.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And most of the time, like if I'm doing something for work and my dad calls, I send it to voicemail. Yeah. And I call him back later.
Yeah, who's doing that? Oh, let me just put you on speaker in front of these business partners. Hey, Vice President Dad, you're on speaker.
Right.
Hold on. It's my vice president father. Just give me a second, guys. I know you wanted to talk some business and how much money you were going to pay me, but just let me put you on. Dad, are you there? Hey, I'm in the middle of a business meeting right now, but you want to talk about that other thing from that other company a little bit later?
And remember how much these same people who are normalizing this freaked out about, Trump having state dinners at his golf clubs and, charging for the golf carts in the rooms and making money off of. Now he flew to the Middle East and Israel all of the time. Like, you have to have equal justice under the law. You can't say one was bad and one was good. Either they're both bad or they're both good. Yeah. Or they're both fine. But they're selling access to our own politics for decisions that may or may not be good for all of us.
Yeah, indeed. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments below. We've got more news to get to here in a moment. We're going to be joined with a report from Patrick Lancaster in Donetsk, which has been under constant and heavy shelling over the past 24 hours. We'll bring you that report, which is really the center of the war right now and what's happening there. We'll take you to the front lines, MSNBC, CNN. Nobody's covering that. We will. Our little dinky show here at Redacted, this independent news organization. We will do all of that. Before we get to this, I do want to show a little surprise because someone in the chat was like, "Hey, did I miss the surprise?" No, it's a little surprise, but I did. This just arrived today, and I just wanted to share it, and I wanted to say thank you to everybody. It's not a bottle of champagne. It's not a bottle of champagne. Our friends over at Rumble just sent this to us. Here it is. And this is very special. And the other, this is a new, ooh, it's heavy. This is like iron. This thing is like ridiculous how heavy this thing is. Can you take camera 1 here? So this is our new Rumble Award. There we go. This is our new Rumble Award for hitting 250,000 viewers on Rumble. So thank you so much for this new award for that. We really appreciate it. And thanks to all of you guys out there who support us over on Rumble. But we're actually now closer to 400,000. So by the time it took them to print this and make it,
I mean, it's a solid item.
it is really heavy. It is really heavy. So thank you to Rumble. Thank you to all of you guys for supporting independent journalism. By the way, we should mention, just as a side note, because YouTube gave us a community strike, 4 of them, and when you hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube, you get a golden play button. And when we hit 1 million, I went to their support, and I was like, oh, it'd be nice to be able to get that golden play button. You know, we work really hard on this show. And YouTube said, I'm sorry, because you've violated community guidelines, we can't give you the award.
Maybe our children can draw one up for us, and we'll just put it on
I know
the wall.
where I can get you one. So
I don't want to counterfeit one.
I don't want to fake one, these bastards. These punks. Anyway.
That's messed up, though.
We
I know, it's
earned
crazy. My son today, he was looking at our other, like our silver play button from YouTube when we hit 100,000 subscribers. And he's like, Dad, when are you getting the million? You're now almost at 3 million. He's like, why didn't you get 1 million play button from YouTube? And I said, oh, they won't send it to us because we were bad, because we covered COVID. And we told the
Yeah, but you know
we told
what's
the
crazy
truth
about it? The craziest part about it is all the stuff we got suspended for has been reversed. We can
Yes.
say it all now.
I know.
Yeah. But they don't review those strikes. I mean, we literally said that the vaccine was not stopping the transmission in 2021 in the summer. And so we got a strike for that when it was not allowed to say that thing. So
All of this to say thank you to Rumble. Thank you, Rumble, for being a
and
free...
thank you for not giving us strikes for saying things like that.
Thank you for being a free speech platform over on Rumble. Thanks to all of you guys who follow us and subscribe. So thank you guys so much. We got more news to get to here, though.
All right. First, we want to tell you about our friends over at Lear, because it's no secret, if you're tuned in, and you are, because you're watching this show, you know that experts are predicting a recession heading our way. Layoffs already happening, and the government is printing more and more money, further devaluing the U.S. dollar. While last year was terrible for most investors, 2023 could be even worse unless you were smart and invested in gold. Then you were protected from loss while other investments fell. If the experts are right and we do get hit with a recession, then 2023 could be even better for gold and silver investors. So if you are interested in investing in gold, then Lear can help you start purchasing precious metals or converting part of your IRA or 401k into a gold and silver IRA. Call Lear Capital today at 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com. Right now, if you buy 1 ounce of gold, Lear Capital is giving away a free ounce of silver. That's incredible, and it's yours. You can keep it or sell it immediately, free silver. There are a lot of gold companies to choose from, and Lear Capital has over 25 years of experience, thousands of 5-star reviews, and risk-free guarantees that gives you 24 hours to review your purchase before committing to it. Lear Capital is a top choice when buying gold and silver, so call Lear at 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com and get your free gold and silver investor guide and receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. So once again, to learn more, that's 800-613-3557 or go to LearRedacted.com.
All right, thank you for that. All right, let's turn our attention now to the war in Ukraine. And let me just do this here. There we go. Okay. All right, let's turn our attention now to the war in Ukraine. And the hottest zone right now is around the area of Donetsk. And this is, of course, where the heaviest shelling has been taking place from the Ukrainian side into the People's Republic of Donetsk. Excuse me. Let me do that again. All right, let's try. Take two on that. All right, guys.
Take two.
Take two. Let me spit this out. Some of the hottest and most vicious bombing right now has taken place in Ukraine and has taken place near the border of Donetsk. This is where civilians over the past week have come under heavy shelling, constant shelling. Of course, this area has been hit since 2014 with shelling. But this is the area right now where Russian forces are fighting the fiercest battle against Ukrainian positions. And the bombing has been fierce and absolutely devastating. Patrick Lancaster, independent journalist, filed this report from the front lines of Donetsk. It is absolutely horrifying what is happening right there. Watch, please.
Move. This is mine for us. Hands to the left. To the left. Come on. Quick. Sam, по прямой. Go. Don't stop, bro.
All right, Redacted. I'm on the Russian front line between Donetsk and Avdiivka right now. We just filmed the report, and we came under pretty intense shelling. Apparently, we were spotted from above, and they were shelling all around us and firing machine guns at us, and the Russian soldiers we were with firing back. Here's the whole report from us getting here until us narrowly evading being seriously injured. My cameraman, Sasha, was a little bit injured, but it's just a little, thank God. So here's the video. You know, you're not going to see this in a Western mainstream video. We give you a choice to see things on both sides of the line.
Двигаемся. Я первый. Он через 4 метра за мной. Ты следом через 7 метров после него. Ты замыкаешься, да, через 4 метра. Сигналы. Вот так. Значит, внимание, стоп. Вот так. Смотрим наверх по сторонам. Вот так вперед. Если вдруг начинаются обстрелы, без паники, просто в кусты. Либо, если пойдете по окопам, значит, в ближайший козырек. Без паники. Или в лисе норе, без паники. Главное, не спотыкаться, не падать. Не спешить, не падать, да. Да, дойдем, все будет нормально, окей.
И как вы думали, будет активнее сегодня?
Я не знаю.
Мы этого пока не знаем, но здесь
ну, я надеюсь, что нет.
всегда стабильно напряженная.
Ну,
что будем надеяться,
50-50.
Надеяться на лучшее и стараться не рисковать.
Все готовы?
Да.
Вперед.
Okay, so
We got
caught that on camera, but there was just an explosion. Yeah, there's another one. All right, so I think we should move forward a little bit.
Славяне.
All right, so we just came down in the bunker here on the trench line. As you heard, it's getting a little loud outside, getting a little more active. But we're going to have a talk to some of the soldiers here and see what they have to say. Можно сказать, вас откуда?
Сибирь. Сибирь, Красноярск.
Сибирь, да? И как обстановка здесь?
Обстановка здесь. Ну, сами видите, жарковато бывает, бывает нормально. Так уже привыкли, уже по кайфу.
Да?
Стабильно напряженная. Да, стабильно напряженная. Стабильненько.
Ага. И вас мобилизация или контракт, или как?
Мобилизация.
Мобилизация, да? И когда?
Сентября.
Да? Ага.
Октябрь.
И как вы думали за это?
Как вы относитесь к этому? Ну как? Родина позвала.
Да?
Надо идти. Ага. Кто если минут?
Ага. И как вас мама, папа думал это за видос?
Ну, ждут дома все родные.
Да?
Да.
Что, если можно, что ты был говорить Зеленский? What would you say to Zelensky if you had a chance?
Да, ну если может что-то есть вот, к украинскому руководству или к солдатам, что можно...
Есть. Завязывайте, да, мужики, завязывайте. Эта война ни вам, ни нам не нужна. Мы славяне убиваем славянов на самом деле. Мы убиваем друг друга. Ну зачем? завязать с этим поскорее, да и по домам уже отдыхать. Дай Бог.
Как долго война будет?
Я не знаю. Не знаю. Пока не знаю. Надеюсь, скоро кончится. Дело очень сильно надеемся, что скоро кончится. И родители наши все надеются, что скоро кончится, все родные.
Сейчас идет украинское наступление, контрнаступление. Вот как можете его характеризовать? Что вы ощущаете? Ну, по этому поводу, что можете сказать?
Мы готовы. Готовы?
Конечно,
готовы.
Идемте к нам, пацаны, мы вам гостинцев приготовили.
Сам видишь, все завалено. Будете у нас на Колыме, милости просим.
Вот еще по поводу недавних событий. Был удар по Крымскому мосту. Как вы думаете, повлияет это на ситуацию на фронте? Зачем это было? Вот, ваше отношение к этому событию?
Я вообще не понимаю, зачем они бьют по мирным жителям. Вот этого я вообще не понимаю. А что ответит Путин, я не знаю. Посмотрим. Один раз ударил по Крымскому мосту, он неплохо ответил. Сейчас посмотрим, что скажет.
All right, so as you heard, now we're gonna head out and go to another position even closer to Ukrainian positions.
You ready, Patrick?
There's some machine gun fire. Whenever we will go closer to our position where we're heading out right now. So if we will make it quiet, there's no fire. So if they will see us, guys,
So if they see us,
we have to be ready for some machine gun fire.
Okay.
So they don't care you're a journalist or whoever you are.
Okay. So as you say, we'll do.
Yes. Now we diving into that trench right here.
Okay.
And we going heading out to position.
Okay, great.
So you guys ready? It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Let's go.
Okay, here we go.
We're working.
Приветствую, братан.
Infrared.
Ага. See you. Приветствую, братан.
Журналист. Можно сказать, где мы сейчас?
Где мы находимся? Примерно. На передовой, на
Да.
первой линии.
И как далеко украинские позиции?
Близко.
Да?
Очень
Ну,
близко.
Больше 100, меньше 100?
По-разному.
Ага.
И 100 есть и ближе, есть и дальше.
Ага. И самое ближе, как вы думал?
Метров 150.
Да? Ага, понял. И вы откуда?
С Донецка.
Да?
Родился в Донецке, живу в Донецке. Служу в Донецке.
Ага. Мобилизация или?
Да, мобилизация.
Ага, so...
В 22 году, 28 февраля. Пришла
понял.
повестка на работу, ну и пошли защищать, служить.
И это был твой первый раз?
Первый раз.
Ага. И как вы чувствуете?
Ну, сейчас другие уже чувства. А когда пришел первый раз, ну, кто не боится?
И
Ну,
что-
не знаю, как передать сейчас вот эти чувства, которые уже после службы года. Ну,
что вы думал будет дальше?
дальше что?
Да.
Да хочется, чтобы мир настал. Чтобы с той стороны поняли, ну, люди, что тут такие же. И не Россия виновата, как ну, обвиняют всех. Что вот Россия, вот амнистия началась. Нет.
Вы как местный, вы местный, какой страна Донецк?
Российская Федерация.
Да?
Да.
Ну, Европа и США сказал, это Украина.
Люди говорят, это Российская Федерация.
Местный, да?
Местный, да. То, что говорят люди там, ну, за морями, за бугром, а приехать и спросить у самих людей, кто они, никто же не приезжает, либо правду не показывает.
И как вы думал, сколько процент местные люди Донецк за Россию и сколько процент за Украину?
Это процентов 90.
Да?
За Россию.
Понял.
Ну, а вы знаете кого-нибудь, кто за другую сторону?
Нет. Все мои знакомые, друзья, товарищи, ну, родственники, семья, у нас все Российская Федерация.
Понял. И год на 9 лет назад был референдум, да? Заходит.
Да.
Украины. Вы был голосовать?
Да, за Донецкую Народную Республику.
И на вот год назад, в сентябре, был другой референдум за Россию.
Мы все голосовали за Россию.
Тоже, да?
Мы, Донецк, это Российская Федерация. Это не Украина уже, бывшая страна, в которой мы были, это Российская Федерация. Люди паспорта получали, думают по-другому. И Российская Федерация нам помогла, а не кто-то. Донецк же не пошел туда с оружием, они же пришли на Донецк.
Почему война есть сейчас?
Ну, это у политиков спросим.
Да?
Что мы, обычные люди, можем ответить, почему война.
Ну, Европа сейчас сказала, это все за русские агрессии.
В Европе, в США продвигают нарратив, что причина войны – российская агрессия.
Ну, я же, видите, у них свой мировой взор. Здесь люди, которые живут 9-10, сколько идет война. Мы думаем по-другому. Не они даже, мы все донецкие.
Понял.
Война это, у них война. Они поставляют оружие сюда и убивают наших местных детей, и матерей, жен.
Думал, США виноваты, да, или как?
США, не знаю. Страна вроде бы страной, а лезут во все войны.
Ага, против Запада, да?
Ну, а кто?
Ну все, спасибо большое.
Да не за что.
Здесь зеленка очень сильная. Чего не видно. По линии был место 70 метров от них.
Сколько?
70.
Ага.
Примерно.
Вау. Можно видеть они там или?
Да.
Где видеть? Как? Как увидеть?
Как увидеть? Никак.
Сейчас никак.
Зеленка везде. День, да.
Ага, но зима видит, да?
Или ночью, может?
Ночью. Ночью в тепляк можно.
To be safe. Just
Ukrainian drones, yeah?
Yeah, it's a Ukrainian drone. So we've been alerted. So there's the drones in the air for our safety. We have to stay, wait for the drone when it will go back to recharge the batteries. Belongs to them and it's higher than our position.
So they can from there they can see us.
Yes, even though we are kind of covered by green because they can see us better because their positions are higher.
Готовы? We think the Ukrainian drone is gone, so we're going to head out.
Well, no matter what, we're going to listen for the air.
Battle's starting to erupt. Film! Go, 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 go! Okay, stay back. Stay back. Move.
Move. This is mine for us.
Hands to the left. To the left.
Come on. Quick.
Сэм, по прямой, не по зеленке.
Бежим.
Move. Don't stop, bro.
Oh shit.
Пригнулись. Оу.
Shit.
Come on. 2 minutes.
Так, бегом из-за стоп. Как Israel starts to prepare. Давай.
Almost.
So, we made it inside this other bunker, and this is where we're going to be taking off from. You're bleeding. Was it shrapnel? Осколок?
Not sure. A little bit.
Ой, пиздец. Looks like Sasha was a little injured. Okay, we're gonna wrap this report up. Like, share, subscribe, support our work. We're out.
Good gracious.
Yeah, unbelievable. Thank you to Patrick and his amazing work there. And I think they found a small kitten. Like, can you imagine that in a war zone? Like they find a kitten along the pathway.
No, and I really appreciated your comments during that piece of when he speaks to those soldiers, and a lot of the comments are like, "Those are kids.
Yeah,
those are just young kids."
And as one of the soldiers said, my mom, my parents hope that this is over soon. And what do you have to say to Zelensky if he's listening right now? And they said, "Stop it.
Yeah.
Just stop it. Stop this attack. Stop this war." And the people there who are from Donetsk, who have been under constant shelling, as he talked about, that they believe they are, of course, part of the Russian Federation. They voted to be as such, and under constant shelling for the last 9 years. Someone in the chat, Susan A., I liked the Susan A.'s question here. Hey, Redacted, I have to ask, why do you think the Ukraine war keeps going? Who is profiting from it the most? It's a great question. I think that these big, massive corporations like BlackRock are profiting the most from it. Remember, NATO wants Ukraine totally destroyed. They don't give a shit at all about the Ukrainian people. The United States has destroyed Ukraine. It's not Russia. The United States and their this proxy war has destroyed Ukraine and turned it into a graveyard. That's exactly what's happened. And now the numbers this afternoon are upwards of 400,000 Ukrainian men are killed, right? Over 2 million wounded. So who profits the most from this? Who's profiting the most from this? These massive corporations, the defense industry, and of course NATO gets to then use Ukraine as an aircraft carrier, essentially. It can launch, it's going to probably build multiple military bases there. It's going to use it in perpetuity as a proxy. That's who benefits. And these poor men are being slaughtered as a result of it.
And the fact that the United States doesn't even do anything for its own people. They don't care about us. So what makes you think they're going to care more about Ukrainians and people around the world?
They do not care. Does anyone... I love the whole propaganda campaign on the part of the United States, putting up flags everywhere. Congress, Nancy Pelosi, bringing flags into Congress, hanging up Ukrainian flags around. They don't give a rat's ass about Ukraine. They want it destroyed. And that's why we're so vehemently anti-war here on this show. This is not... it's not a, pro-Russia or anything. No, it's an absolute stop this madness. The United States and NATO are using it as a proxy and destroying this country.
Yes, absolutely. We are what I like to call non-pacifist peace extremists. We are for peace for everybody. Clayton doesn't like that.
Yeah.
As a slogan. I've gone for it many times. Like, hey guys, do you think we should put this on a T-shirt? Nobody likes it but me, but I think it's catchy.
It's like the rural juror.
No, it's not. It's catchy. Because, when you say you're for peace, people think you're a pacifist, like a hippie. We're not. We're actually well-read, informed, non-pacifists, but we think peace should come at any extreme.
So right, you print the shirt out. I'll buy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can make it a hashtag. What would it be as a hashtag? NPPE.
I don't know.
Hashtag.
It would be too long. Be a massive hashtag.
You're with me, right? Okay.
I don't know.
All right. I feel like the chat is with me on this, and I feel like this is really like tapping the nerve of our collective identity is that we're not pacifist.
I think a great poll would be to create a t-shirt and see how many people buy it.
How many people buy it? Okay. All right. Speaking of t-shirts, we want to tell you about the Redacted store before we move into our next piece, because that is a place where you can find things that already exist. You cannot find a t-shirt that says non-pacifist peace extremists yet, but you can find other limited edition t-shirts. David, no, that was yesterday. You were wearing your silence equals complicity. Today, he's wearing a shirt that I think you can get that at Target, right? And we also have redacted mugs, such as the one that's on our desk right now. We have redacted hats. We have sweatshirts and hoodies and water bottles and sort of, what do we call those, thermal coffee mugs as well. And our kids like to rock those around the house. We love it when you buy this merchandise and you send us pictures of you wearing it. It's just sets our heart on fire. So if you are interested in supporting the show, supporting independent journalism, please visit redactedstore.com and just check out what we've got there for you, because we make it for you so that you can signal to the world that you too are a non-pacifist peace extremist, because that's what our show stands for. Shut up, Clayton. So anyway, yes, see, Sherry Lynn says, I'm in. She likes the slogan. So maybe we will put something up there eventually. It is not up there yet. So check out what we do have at redactedstore.com. Once again, you can find it at redactedstore.com.
Did the country of Sweden try to clean up the crime scene at the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline? Independent journalist Jeffrey Brodsky, the only journalist to go to all 4 of the blast sites and actually remove sediment for lab analysis, has been following this story. He just published a bombshell story just a short time ago, earlier this afternoon, and is here with those lab results. Jeffrey, welcome back to the show. This is really a follow-up to a story we brought to our audience a few weeks ago. You were first on the show to explain to our audience how you went to multiple crash sites, removed sediment, sent them in for lab analysis, and now today you have those results. Can you tell our audience what you found or what they found?
Sure. Thanks for having me back, Clayton. I'm pleased that I can finally share with your audience the results of the tests that we had, the explosive analysis test that we had. These are some remaining samples, some extra samples that we have. As you said, they were collected from one of the blast sites of the Nord Stream sabotage. We took these sediment samples to a lab in Germany, and we had them analyzed for explosive traces. There was a whole host of chemical substances that we asked to be detected, if there was any detection. One of them was HMX. This was, of course, the explosive traces, or allegedly the explosive traces that were found aboard Andromeda, which was a small yacht, or pleasure yacht, a small boat that was allegedly used to by a six-person team of pro-Ukrainians to attack the Nord Stream pipelines. We also had these sediments tested for TNT, PETN, RDX, and a whole host of chemical substances that are often found in explosives. Unfortunately, the analysis did not detect any explosive traces.
None. So no explosive traces were found by this lab?
No.
Now, it was 8 months after the explosion that you were there getting this sediment. And as we talked offline, I guess the idea is that perhaps in 8 months, these pieces of residue of these explosives could have dissipated somehow. But in your expert analysis, speaking with different experts that you've been speaking to over the past number of months, does that seem likely that this would have all disappeared?
It's unknown. It doesn't seem likely, and it doesn't seem unlikely. It could have disappeared. But we do know that Sweden has been to the blast sites on at least 2 occasions. Your audience probably knows that the Nord Stream sabotage took place on September 26, 2022. Shortly after, Sweden sent a team of investigators to the blast sites, and they have admitted publicly that they removed material, sediments, debris, parts of the ruptured pipeline from the blast site. Then someone named Trond Larsen, he's a drone operator. He was commissioned by Expression, a Sweden newspaper, to go to one of the blast sites to capture underwater drone images and footage of one of the blast sites. when he went, after the Swedish investigators went, he still found a decent amount of large parts of the pipeline that had been ruptured, debris, sediment. It didn't look like the area had been. It looked like it may have been cleaned, but not totally cleaned, let's say. Then Sweden cordoned off the area again, closed the area again, and they sent in their investigators again. And we know that this second time they removed even more debris materials because Trond Larsen, the same job operator who I interviewed in my article, he was commissioned once again by the BBC to go to the same blast site. And the second time that he went, he told me that the blast site looked drastically different. It looked like it had been cleaned. There had been far fewer pieces of the ruptured pipeline, less debris. So we know the Swedish investigators have cleaned up the crime scene on at least two occasions, and they have said so publicly. This is, I think, reported in the New York Times and maybe in Reuters also.
So it's entirely possible that when they go down there with the dredging machines or giant, I've seen these things under the ocean where they use these giant tubes that basically sucking up not only sediment, but also particles, pieces, rocks, and pieces of the pipeline. So metallic pieces, et cetera, they would be sucking up a lot of this debris and sediment. Entirely possible. So then your sediment analysis goes to the lab, but it had quite an odyssey, didn't it? Because I think this is a very important part of the story, which is the pushback that you received from a number of labs. You took your sediments to multiple for-profit labs around Europe to have them analyze sediments that they would normally do. Like, these are sediment analysis that they would normally do at these labs, for-profit labs. And what were you being told at a number of different labs?
Yes, so I contacted about a dozen labs, and before we finally found one in Germany. Some of these labs I contacted, for example, said that they couldn't do the type of analysis that was required in order to detect these explosive traces because they didn't offer that type of analysis. And I know this to be untrue because it was advertised on their website. One lab, for example, told me that they could that I'd been emailing with a lab, for example, one in Denmark, and it seemed like that they were going to do this analysis that I requested, and I've been emailing with them. And I was actually about to hop on a plane. I live here in Spain, in Barcelona, and I was going to go from Barcelona to Copenhagen to deliver these sediment samples. And then suddenly I received an email from them saying that we can't service you, with no explanation. Another lab here in Spain, I contacted them and they told me, actually, not only can we not service you, but you need to call the Spanish police immediately, and you need to turn over your sediment samples. And this didn't seem right because I talked to the managing director of an explosive engineering company, and he actually recommended this lab in Spain and said, Jeffrey, that they do the type of analysis you need. I've worked with them before. And he's worked throughout Europe and the United Kingdom. And according to his knowledge and his experience and background, both in the European Union and the United Kingdom, individuals can have small traces, small sediment samples that may or may not contain explosive traces in their home, store them in their home and transport them, especially if it's for scientific purposes. But I was told that it was illegal, and that doesn't seem to be the case. So I was receiving a lot of pushback, and labs were very reluctant to help me or service me and my colleague. And we finally found one in Germany. And when we did, we delivered the samples on June 16th. We were told it would take approximately 5 to 10 business days to get the results back. I talked to the lab the week afterwards and had to give them some further information. And I also wanted to talk to them to just make sure that they didn't need any further information on my part from me in order to carry out the analysis. I was told that everything was fine. I contacted them at the end of June, well over 5 to 10 business days after we'd originally turned in the sediment samples. And they told me, Jeffrey, we don't have any record of you as a customer. And not only that, we can't locate your samples. So I exchanged, 5 or 6 very vague, and they sent me very vague and frustrating emails to me. And finally, they did locate my sediment samples, and they told me that it was an accident, and they were left in their refrigerator in their office. So then finally, you had to provide the same information I'd already provided. And then finally, around July 21st, 20th, something like that, they finally did give me back the results. But it didn't seem like they were very interested in servicing me, although I was a paying customer and it's a for-profit lab, like all the other ones were for-profit.
Unbelievable. So they finally deliver to you these results with an absence of explosives attached to it. Entirely possible, of course, that there was nothing there. Do you think that something nefarious is going on? They intentionally didn't want to find explosive results in these tests? They had, I mean, after all, how do you know, right? I mean, I guess we're trying to prove a negative in a way, but how do you know if they don't come back to you with any sort of response? It could have been 50-50, right?
We don't know, and it could have been 50-50. The circumstances may, if not nefarious, maybe they were insidious, but in a minimum, I think the circumstances were nebulous. This was the case with many labs. My colleague told one lab that we found the explosive traces in the Baltic Sea, and immediately the lab said, sorry, can't service you. He told another lab that we found the explosive traces in Ukraine, and that lab representative's pants seemed to catch on fire because he couldn't get off the phone soon enough. Couldn't enter communication soon enough. But we did finally find this lab in Germany. And something that was at least, somewhat strange to me is my understanding is that they give all of their customers their general terms and conditions. They sent me a PDF file, kind of like a non-disclosure agreement. And in this non-disclosure agreement, it's very clear that customers cannot share or publish the lab results unless they get written permission. I, of course, contacted the lab and asked for this written permission. And I was told that they needed to talk to the legal department. But I was also told that same day by a customer service representative that, there had been precedent for people publishing their lab results in press releases, in journals, in newspapers and magazines. So I was feeling pretty optimistic that, they were going to let me publish these results. And this was before we knew what the results were, I should mention also. But they did not let me do that. So what I've written about today, published an article in a Spanish newspaper and also on my Substack, as you said, I've written about as much as I possibly legally can and could.
Well, unbelievable story, and thank you for trying to get to the bottom of it. We'll see if any other evidence emerges as to the cleanup process of this crime scene at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, but it seems like there's some really strong powers that are going to great lengths to keep this a secret. Jeffrey Brodsky, thank you so much for your reporting on this. We'll have a link to your posting of this and your reporting of this on your Substack in the description below. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, and thank you for the work on this.
Clayton, thanks for having me again.
And again, our thanks to Jeffrey. We really appreciate it. Again, this is the sort of independent journalism that we are proud to give voice to on this show. And when you support us here by just subscribing for free or tweeting us out or sharing it with somebody else, we really are able to give voice to these amazing independent journalists who rely on us to really share their work around the world. Without them, we wouldn't have a show and we wouldn't have the truth. Otherwise, we'd be relying on CNN and MSNBC and all of that garbage. We would never be able to get these types of stories. So thank you to Jeffrey, and thanks to all of you for subscribing. If you'd like to support independent journalism, if you'd like to support our show in an even bigger way, and like I said, you can just subscribe. That's totally free. But if you'd like to join our community, we have a Redacted Rebels VIP community, and we've got a lot of big things in store as we head into the fall of this year. We're launching Natalie's book club. You get access to content before anybody else, some big interviews before anybody else sees them, and content and in live streams exclusively for our VIP community. So all you need to do, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, if you'd like to support our community, and we have a very large community. I love it. You guys are amazing. If you come over to redacted.inc, that's the place to go. Just go to redacted.inc, not .com, and then just click on the community tab right there. And again, you can join our locals community for the price of a cup of coffee once a month. That's the cheapest tier I think that we've got, and you can go up from there. Again, totally up to you, but we would love for you to support what we do here. It's how we're able to pay our staff and keep the lights on and do what we do. So thank you guys so much for an amazing week, amazing support here in the dog days of summer when everyone is out and, traveling and everything else. Tens of thousands of you, we had millions of you watch the show over the past week, which is amazing. So thanks to all of you from the deepest part of our heart. We really, really appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everyone. We will have content throughout the weekend as well as usual, and we've got some pretty big interviews coming up here that are really jaw-dropping, and we're excited to share them with you. So thank you guys so much. Have a great night, and we'll see you back here first thing on Monday. Bye, everyone.